Hanaah Lansel was born and raised in South Korea and moved to the United States when she was a teenager. Her parents raised her to be a violinist, but when she immigrated to the USA, she changed her scope of study and she received a BA in economics. She was always curious about history and sociology. Her interest in history, coupled with her own personal history of family and school trauma, motivated her to study the human psyche in relation to history. Hanaah is currently studying psychology at the Object Relations Institute. Just in case if you didn't notice, you're competing with many other sessions. So hopefully somebody will come. By the way, how do you know Marcy?
She is the one who was editing my abstract.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So you have 40 minutes, and I just wanted to let you know that I was teaching psychoanalysis to Korean students in Seoul via Zoom. So I have some ideas about Koreans. So go.
Okay. So I'm gonna share a slide right
Okay.
now.
Okay.
Okay. Let me see if I can do this. Top presentation. Okay, so I'm on it. Reflection and parallels of Korea's modern history and my personal experience. That I see. And then this, I'm gonna explain this in conjunction of object relation and prevailing model. But Marcy said that not everyone is familiar with the Fairbairn psychology, so she said I should explain that. So I'm going to explain that.
Okay.
And then, so see if I can do everything. It's a little bit kind of tight here. So this is the content I'm going to presenting the Fairbairn mind model, and then the with Kathleen Arnold. I'm not sure if I have a space for this. Her view on politics of domestic abuse and reflection of such a psychology in history and personal experience, and the historical example, and then Korea's history and Korea's Confucian culture and paradigm, and Korea's condition, result of that at the end of 19th century, and it's parallel to my experience. So my experience comes last. And I have to run pretty fast on this one.
Okay.
Okay, so Ronald Fairbairn, Scottish psychologist who rejected the Freud drive model. And then it's infant total dependency on mother. It's not the drive, sex drive, and then it's seeking pleasure. No. Fairbairn said that what's important for infant is it's getting nurture and protection, because it is totally helpless of everything. Infant cannot reject mother if mother is abusive or neglectful. Infant doesn't have any choice. Infant split mind, and when the neglect and abuse happens, infant split its own mind and hold that negative experience so that the other part of the mind can still have a relationship with the mother. Okay. And the next, okay. Key points in Fairbairn model. The split ego parts and their corresponding attached bad objects are source of all psychological problems. The parental abuse and neglect does not make child less need of parent, but more. That's a real paradox. But infant doesn't have any choice here, keep in mind. Because of need to get nurtured, child doesn't have any other choice. It's just totally helpless. Dr. Celani, David P. Celani, Peter Celani, his own words, it's like a car that does not have gas. It cannot go anywhere. So that's the condition of the infant. It's when infant cannot get nurture as it become adult. Even the body may grow, the mind itself is having a developmental arrest. It's stuck in like 5-6-year-old or 9-year-old, depends on the whatever the stage of the development that may be. Okay. But his original model was messy, and it has to be cleaned up and developed further by object relation psychologists such as Stephen Mitchell, Thomas Ogden, and David Celani. Okay, and so this is a cleaned up Fairbairn model. There are 3 ego in this model: central ego, anti-libidinal ego, and libidinal ego. There are 2 objects that are internalized. One is good object, other is bad object. And this bad object is split into 2. And it's best to see because it's whenever I talk about it, it's kind of confusing. So it's like this, Fairbairn model. So the central ego and then ideal object. It's a good object. This is the good object. And the bad object is split into 2 here. The rejecting, attacking object and the exciting object here. And then that each object is attached to anti-libidinal and libidinal ego. This anti-libidinal ego internalizes all the attack and abuse that it received. It's hold on to it and it's attached to it. And it becomes unconscious. And this object, bad object, is split into 2. So little teeny bitty nurture it gets, it exaggerated and then fantasize about the perfect complete nurture it can get, and then split its own ego into libidinal ego. So it's expecting that it's going to get a nurture. Its nurture is just around the corner. And this sustains the hope, the life. Because if it is stuck with this, it's not going to have a hope or any hope or future nurture expectation. It'll just die. So the psyche will just die. And that's why it's having this. So this is a Fairbairn model drawn by David Celani. This central ego, it's the same as this, but this 3-part is drawn into this one circle, and one circle has ideal object, central ego, and then the libidinal exciting object, anti-libidinal rejecting object, like this in this one circle. But this unconscious, this part can come here, and this central ego goes here, and this libidinal ego, this part can come here, and central ego can go to this part as well. And this 3-circle model describes this. The top of it is the libidinal ego, and the here, libidinal ego exciting object is conscious. In this part, central ego ideal object is conscious. This part, anti-libidinal and rejecting object is conscious. And in a person, this is not stuck, but it kind of moves around. So a person has a really bad opinion of something else, then it suddenly switches. It doesn't make any sense, logical sense, but you had an opinion about the person a day ago, and then you have suddenly changed your opinion. Then the situation changes, something like that, and then have bad opinion. So like that. If you see some people doing that, as a matter of fact, a lot of people doing that, that's what the switch is going on. And it's not just about in people relationship. It's about opinion about celebrity and political figure as well, which is not really reasonable and balancing. Attachment to bad object. Bad object is attack plus allure, the potential nurture. That's exciting. The child cannot reject, for one cannot change the parents. Well, Yeah, that's pretty obvious because he cannot live without parents even if they neglect abuse him. And neglect abuse increase the child need for the parents in order to get nurture. That's really the key point. When such abusive dynamic, when such a child become adult, they seek or drawn to relationships that are similar to what they had during childhood, because that's what they know and familiar with, either conscious or unconsciously. And lack of trust in good object and central ego, because there has been too many disappointment or violation, both outright and subtle. And how that person views another is that that person here may view you as a rejecting object or exciting object, as anti-libidinal, libidinal ego in that state. Not in this state of a person can be both good and bad, but it's totally bad or totally good, something like that. Rarely sees another person as a good object because the central ego is too weak, underdeveloped, and inexperienced to have real relationship. But David Selani, he said that everyone has a little bit of anti-libidinal ego and libidinal ego. So it's a matter of strength of central ego, and how much the central ego is strong. That's what is dependent upon the sanity. It's basically. So here in this model, okay. So libidinal ego sees partner has become internal image of exciting object, and anti-libidinal ego and the anti-libidinal ego rejecting object. Anti-libidinal ego sees the other person as rejecting object, or that person can become the rejecting object itself, identify with the rejecting object and become the abuser. Okay, so I hope that's clear. And they have that, and that dynamic goes on with the parents, but that dynamic can be transferred to another person, like to therapist or a friend or a spouse or children. That's the worst case scenario. And that's part of substitutive satisfaction for the nurture that it didn't get. Having children, substance addict, abuser, food addict, weight problem, obsessive, compulsive, anorexic, sex addict, workaholic, etc. And this deficiency in nurture support in early development retards prevents differentiation integration. Because of lack of differentiation, the person sees outside the people as their part of internal object. And because of lack of integration, that person cannot see or have a hard time seeing that person has both the bad, good and bad side. And a lot of people are actually like that when they see celebrity or political figure, they see it all good or bad. They don't see it as balanced. As they either idolize or defame that person or badmouth that person. And social reinforcement. And what happens is that it's a part object dynamic. It's not a whole person. So it's a sexualized, therefore part object and frontal persona based role model, encourage male to identify with abuser and female to identify with abuse. That's the general trend. It can be the other way around, but that's the general trend that's going on. And the objectification of human value and part. We all know that's going on in commercialized value of human and everything else related to that. Movie, mass media, TV program reinforce this image consciously, unconsciously. And the book, one of the book that's written by William Bryan Key, Media Sexploitation, 1976. One of the great book that was. And then the social reinforcement, alienation of central ego, reduction of central ego, denial of central ego, cutting down oneself to fit in order to fit in or avoid to be target of such projection, and cultural reinforcements, not just individually but collectively. But the truth is there is no clear boundary between private and public in this sense. And then Dr. Jeffrey Rubin remind me, politics is personal. That's what he said, and I think that's very much true. So the strengths of psychosis depends on the extent of internalization of a bad object and the degree of their badness and the extent that ego is identified with the bad object. Okay, so everyone has a little bit of anti-libidinal ego, means also they have a libidinal ego as well. Unconscious structures are phonetics, and that leads to collective unreasonableness. And there are a lot of, I'm going to skip this because it's getting, and this also, I'm going to skip this. Time is getting, yeah, already 20 minutes. And I already have, okay. So this, in social dynamic, emptying negative psychic content in the low hierarchy because it's easier to project onto another person and does anything of that, everything of projective and action and thought without much consequences or feeling of guilt. During 16 to 1800s, it could be argued that Korea was in a worse situation than modern North Korea. Given such a condition, undesirable psychic content were projected onto weaker members of society due to less resistance to that direction. In terms of object relation theory, idealizing bad object with compartmentalized the schizoid way of thinking was sanctioned and absorbed. Yeah, and let's see. Okay, and so okay, I'm gonna skip that. Historical example, it happened a lot in other parts of the world other than Korea. Like for example, reaction of European public when outbreak World War I outbreak news was heard. They were joyous. And one historian said European nations were sleepwalking into World War I. And I think that's very much true. And nobody knew how destructive that would be. I think that's not true. And other example, the French public, how joyous they were on the verdict of Dreyfus Trial, cultural revolution of communist China, and honor killing of Muslim, honor killing of a woman in Muslim society. I wish I can go to these details, but I don't have time how dynamic of this works. I'm like really short of time here. The collective pattern, the boarding school syndrome. People think that abusive pattern is not really, let me see, much of a, it doesn't present in society, but it is very much so. I think I have to read this part because it's so much of a reminder of what happened in the past. Let me see, okay. Okay, this is from the excerpt. The boarding school syndrome, the psychological trauma of the privileged children. The long chamber at Eton was notorious for its brutality. This is vividly described by both Galton Hardy and Candos. This barn-like room where 52 scholars slept was 172 feet long and 15 foot high. It was unheated until 1784, when 2 fireplaces was put in. The windows were broken, and in the winter, snow drifted and covered the beds. It was filthy, stinking of corrupting rats' corpses, odor and urine. There were not enough of a large oak bed, 4 feet 6 inches across, in which the boys slept together for sex or huddled close for warmth. In some had sleep on the floor. In 1834, reports stated that the inmates in the workhouse or gaol are better fed and lodged, etc. You get the picture. And this condition was continued, and it became the worst at the end of at the later part of 18th century. So it's not that far away of what we were, how we are right now. And in 1970s, in France, women were not allowed to take a walk after dark unless they were accompanied by men. And the one who broke it, they were punished. Let's see. Okay, collective pattern. Okay, in USA, a quarter of female, a quarter of male sexually abused. In Middle East Africa, beating wife and children is common. Criminalizing victim of rape. And in Europe and Asia, beating wife and children is common, although it gets gradually reduced. I read that statistically, 2/3 of European and Central Asia children, they had experience of violent discipline, corporal discipline. It's not just mere spanking. And in 1979, 2/3 of Germans believed the corporal punishment of children, from the Alice Miller's book. I think it was For Your Own Good. And Jeffrey Mosaip's messenger experience is how sexual abuse was regarded as non-existent, as a matter of fact. I don't know if I have time to read this. No, I don't think I have time to read about that either. And other example, 23 women, the story of international traffic. This is, I think, worse than Jeffrey Epstein's case. And this was in the beginning of the 20th century. 30 years better with the crimes by John H. Warren Jr. This was, I think, 1870 or 90 published. A final word, in addition to what we have already said to the chapter on prostitution, and we have done, prostitution with us has been treated hitherto as an evil that could not be touched. To mention it even was of itself sufficient to call forth rebuke. To meddle with it was utterly impossible. Okay, that was the attitude. The age of consent, the work of William Thomas Stead, a lot of people may know this, raised the age of consent from 14, I think it was from 14 to 16, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so we basically have disowned our past, and that pattern is not like suddenly cut off, but it continues even though we try. So we have to see it from that perspective. It's not that it's suddenly cut off its past. It's we have to still deal with it. It's not mysterious, crazy, psychotic of what's going on. Well, it is crazy, psychotic, but still part of us, and which we have to make it sane and reasonable. Okay, I have not much time here right now. Okay, so abuse neglect is much more prevalent than people usually think. Humanity addled with abuse and neglect, and leading to it, that leads to collective pattern of anti-libidinal ego reaction. hard cell reaction. Okay. And okay. Oh, sorry. Korea's example. Okay, I'm coming to only have 10 minutes. Okay, but okay. Korea's example is filled. Okay, history is filled with such example, but it's not talked about it that much. And also North Korea, I'm not going to talk about that part. I don't think I have time for that. Yeah, North Korea, I'm going to skip that. And Korea history surrounded by powerful states over 4,000 years has such a dynamic and has to adapt to many different tactics. And the Goryeo Star General, Goryeo Dynasty Star General Lee Seong-ge lived from 1335 to 1408. He does a coup and then topple the dynasty and then erect the Joseon dynasty that lasted from 1392 to 1910. And then have unprecedented repression of Buddhists, reduced 3,000 to 243 and further reduced to 36, his great-grandson. And it was unprecedented repression. It was no other time such repression was what happened. And marriage law changed in Goryeo dynasty, wealth handed down from mother to daughter, because daughters were the ones who took care of support and elder parents. But it changed from matriarchal to patriarchal because Joseon dynasty's ruling ethos became Confucian. And then I'm going to skip this. Okay. Okay, it was established in late 1300s, but there was Japan invasion that led to 7-year war. And then shortly after that, China invaded the Korea, which left Korea in ruins, and much of the cultivated land was destroyed. And the result of 2 wars was stop giving salaries to bureaucrats after early 1600s. And then mini ice age hit. And at the same time, it became isolationist without any outside trade, hating Japan and China for obvious reasons. But because it degraded the merchant class, as you can see, it was a king, noble, skilled profession, farmer and merchant, the slaves. And this class of Bakjang lower than slaves who does butchering and human execution. And very limiting and degrading for lower class, especially for women. That include upper class women as well. Commerce and skilled profession were degraded, looked down, disadvantaged purposely, and believing that the commerce and the money degrades human morale, just very similar to European medieval kind of mentality. And parochial ruling outlook. And then because of after that destruction, merchant activity was degraded. There were no merchant activity that could revive the economy. And condition just became worse from then on. And it became so bad that in late 1800s, the average life expectancy was in mid-20s, about 23 for male. It became worse than the previous dynasty, which Joseon elite despised so much. Oh my God, I'm sorry, despised. And official exam to hire bureaucrat became the meritocracy show, nothing more than that. And this, in Confucian ethic, there are 4 important relationships: ruler and ruled, father and son, husband and wife, friends. All these relationships are strictly hierarchical except friends. Filial piety required at all times from subordinates. and subordinate are required to give willingness for obedience. And this is not just willingness of obedience. It's like if King said that I'm going to run down the street naked, and the servants cannot say, are you sure that's a good idea? Instead, he should say, should I have a bottle of water and then towel for you and not around so that you can wipe your sweat? That kind of attitude. And that is the attitude that is expected from this filial piety. And the superior need to take care of subordinate. But there is a caveat. The errors of superior should not be admitted because it endangers the hierarchical system. Okay. And so also there is other ethical aspect. Mencius, the great Confucian scholar who lived from, period. Child cannot abandon their parents no matter how bad they are. If a child parents committed a crime of treason, what he recommends is that he should exile himself with his parents and become like nobody and just live and die like that. That's the recommendation. And eldest male child must live with his parents no matter what and cannot travel farther away from the home. Female must absolutely submit to her father when not married, her husband when married, her son when she is old, and when her husband died. And child cannot defy parents. And there is a 3-year mourning period when parents die. Children were considered as who are guilty of crime. This actually, wait a minute. This. Okay, I think it's fine. Anyhow, let's see. Okay, and then the treatment of a woman. Woman can be divorced if she is disobedient to husband, mother-in-laws, have a severe fatal disease, couldn't have a male heir, stealing something, liking and wanting sex, either from husband or others. Okay, all right, I have to go through really fast. I only have about 5 minutes here. And all Confucian ethics are designed to cut down oneself. Force identification with the parent authority, force the relational mode with inferior, with the bad object, internalize the bad object, strengthening psychosis that is by part object, borderline response. My parent's happiness depends on me because its parent is internalized. That's how he views the relationship. That kind of attitude is encouraged with this ethical model. Okay, I'm gonna skip this, but I can go on for hours. Okay, so Confucian relation pattern. I-ness is punished. And an attitude of anti-narcissism, closet narcissism, borderline empathy identification is encouraged. Sycophantic behavior encouraged. Intergenerational experience through such lens. Filial piety, no matter how bad your parents are, that is emphasized over and over again. I'm gonna skip this. I don't think I have time for this. Model assumes that superior has good intention and is honest. I'm gonna skip this too. Okay, so I only have 5 minutes. Every relationship falls into that category and hierarchical. It's a Dreyfus system and the ad hoc punishment by superior. As far as it is precedented, the sentiment allowed. Okay, and okay, so I'm gonna skip this. All right, and my experience. Okay, I only have 4 minutes. Anti-libidinal rejecting ego. So it was absolute obedience.
Hanaah, we'll give you extra 5 minutes. We want to hear about you.
Okay. I was punished because I didn't wear clothes I was told to wear. I didn't finish the lunchbox, didn't get the school assignment correct, didn't play violin correct, talking back to parents usually about my abuse, neglect, whatever is not exactly correct in their eyes. Okay, and culture itself was unrelenting force. Anything I said about my grievances to other people, other adults would tell me that it is like that because they meant all good, that I am not good enough, that I am not trustworthy. All my relatives and teachers said this. That actually, this is like just cutting down oneself, repressing oneself, and feeding in that borderline part object model. Basically, that's what it was. If I keep saying that they would get annoyed and I would be the bad kid saying that your parents are like that because you don't shut up, but keep talking like that, or keep telling me that I have to accept or that and understand them. Okay. And that was my experience during 1970s and 80s of Korea. I became my parents' exciting object when I entered the exclusive high school, which only top academic performance with gifted and art are able to enter. When I was trying to speak about my half-brother's sexual abuse on me, I became their anti-libidinal ego, and they identified with their bad object, their parents, and my half-brother. And those generational pattern and patterns and exceptions. When people think it's exception, but it actually look like exception, but it is not. That was very commonplace. But that's not an accident. It followed the collective pattern of Korean history and society of part ego, internalized the bad object way of thinking and interacting. Dr. David Chelani's word, who is a Fairbairn expert. What I said in my book are so opposite of what is going on there in Korea. It's a disaster, their relationships. He means South Korea, of course. All of his books are translated in South Korea. And I hope they are having great impact there. And this also reflects the Korea's treatment to comfort women. The Korea's women were enslaved, forced to become a sex slave of Japanese army. Korea and US government at first didn't pay much attention to that. It was a conscious Japanese civilian who brought this to mass media awareness for the first time. A lot of these women were asked by their own countrymen in the first time when they were coming out of this. Why didn't you commit suicide when you know you were ashamed so much? That was the kind of logic there. And still no designated report for comfort woman in Korea. So there is no continuity, but just here and there. Like if there is some issue, then the report is assigned. I think there should be one designated reporter or several group of reporters, but it's not. It's a bad object rejecting attitude is reflected in the policy as well. I'm gonna skip this. Yeah, I'm already 40 minutes like, but you see the thing is that the test of become officials is so much reflected in nowadays examination hell of the South Korea, which some people may know. And the media obfuscation of real issue and over pictures. And these big company head, they also become exciting object or rejecting object, just like a political figure in USA. Like Ronald Reagan. I want to say that all this talk, we need to see that real, but it's also, I'm not gonna go through this 24 states in USA with dual arrest model. That's also traumatic for both female and male. Kathleen Arnold, she's author of Why Don't You Just Talk to Him? The Politics of Domestic Abuse. Realism is not helpful if it maintains the status quo minus any democratic orientation whatsoever. And that's exactly what happened in Joseon Dynasty. And that was the struggle of the South Korea. And I would say it was more successful than other developing countries who were studying, and it was much more successful than other countries. I'm glad to say that. But okay, so that's it.